I'm going to tell you something that will turn the stomach of anyone with a shred of decency. For 10 years of my life, the human being I loved most in this world, the one I raised with such care, the one I brought into this world with pain and joy, this same person violated me every single day while I lay there paralyzed, unable to even move my left arm to defend myself. My own son raped me for an entire decade, and the worst part is that he did it while pretending to care for me. It might sound like something from a horror movie, but it happened right here in Savannah, Georgia, inside my own home, under the same roof where I raised him, thinking I was raising a good man. My name is Eleanor Bennett. I'm 72 years old, and I live here in Savannah, Georgia. People who see me today selling my medicinal herbs at the Forsyth Farmers Market with my little shop full of healing plants, talking with people, giving advice about teas and remedies, they can't begin to imagine the hell I lived through. People know me as Miss Ellie of the Herbs, that lady who always has a smile on her face and a word of comfort for those who are suffering. But behind that smile is a story I kept hidden for a long time, until I decided I couldn't stay silent anymore. Before I continue this heavy story, tell me in the comments what your name is and where you're listening from. I want to know who these brave people are who have the courage to hear the raw truth of life. Because this story I'm about to tell isn't for just anyone. It's a story that will affect you in ways you might never have expected. But I need to tell it because I know there are other women out there going through what I went through. And maybe my courage will give them courage too. Every word I speak here is true. Every detail actually happened, and if you stay until the end, you'll understand why it took me so long to have the courage to talk about it. My life wasn't always about plants and natural remedies. I worked in a textile factory here in Savannah, sewing all day, earning my hard-earned money to raise my son alone. The factory was in the industrial district, a large, noisy building where hundreds of women spent the day hunched over sewing machines, making clothes we could never afford to buy for ourselves. Junior's father left me when he found out I was pregnant, said he didn't want responsibility, that he was too young to be a father. He was a handsome boy from a good family who filled my head with promises and disappeared when he saw that the game had gotten serious. I was only 19 when Junior was born, but I decided I would raise that boy with a lot of love and give him everything I didn't have in my childhood. My own mother had died when I was little. My father was a hard man who didn't know how to show affection. I promised myself that my son would be different, that he would grow up knowing he was loved, that he would have all the opportunities I never had. Looking back, I think it was precisely this excessive love that ended up spoiling him, that made him think he could do anything with me. I worked like a condemned woman for more than 20 years in that factory. I woke up at 5 in the morning, prepared breakfast, left lunch ready for Junior to heat up when he came home from school, took 2 buses to get to work before 7. The factory was a hot, stuffy place, full of fabric dust and chemicals. I spent all day hunched over the sewing machine, doing the same thing thousands of times a day. It was work that hurt my back, strained my eyes, left my fingers stiff from pressing the machine. I returned home at 6 in the evening, dead tired, but I still had to make dinner, help Junior with his homework, wash clothes, clean the house, prepare everything for the next day. It was a routine that broke me inside, but I endured everything thinking about my son's future. On weekends, when I wasn't washing clothes or cleaning, I would take him to the park, buy him ice cream, try to give him the childhood I never had. I saved every penny I could to buy school supplies, good clothes, new shoes when his feet grew. Junior was an affectionate boy, at least that's what I thought at the time. He helped me at home, swept the yard, took out the trash, told me he loved me, said that when he grew up, he would take care of me. These words gave me the strength to continue working hard every day. I dreamed of the day he would graduate, get a good job, and we could have a more peaceful life. It never crossed my mind that inside that boy I was raising with so much sacrifice, a monster was growing. That all that affection I gave him was being interpreted in a sick way. In school, Junior was always an average student. He wasn't among the best, but he didn't cause trouble for the teachers either. He was quiet, obedient, did his assignments without complaining. I went to all the parent-teacher conferences, talked with the teachers, always heard that he was a polite, respectful boy. No one ever complained about him. He never had behavior problems. So I was at ease, thought I was raising him right, that I was on the right track. When he turned 18, I began to notice strange changes in his behavior. First, it was the looks. He would stare at me in a different way, especially when I was changing clothes or coming out of the shower. They were lingering looks that made me uncomfortable, but I tried to ignore them. Sometimes I felt like someone was watching me when I was in the bedroom or bathroom, but when I went to check, he was far away watching TV or on his phone. I thought it was all in my head, that I was getting paranoid from working so much. He also started to get more clingy with me, more affectionate in a way that wasn't normal between a mother and an adult son. He wanted to hug me all the time, gave me kisses on the cheek that lasted longer than normal, was always making excuses to lean against me, to touch me. When I was in the kitchen cooking, he would come up behind me and hug me, pressing his body against mine in a way that made me feel strange. When I complained, he laughed and said he was being affectionate, that he couldn't even hug his own mother. Once he said he wanted to give me a massage because I was very tired from work. I let him, thinking it was a son's affection, but his massage was strange. His hands started on my shoulders as they should, but then went down to my back, to the side of my body, getting close to my breast. When I said something, that it wasn't right, he laughed and said I was exaggerating, that he was just trying to relieve my tension, that I was seeing evil where there was none. Things gradually got worse, in such a subtle way that it took me a while to understand what was happening. He started entering my room without knocking, always with some excuse. He said he wanted to ask me something about school, or that he was looking for something I had borrowed, or that he wanted to talk about work. But I noticed that his eyes were glued to my body in a way that wasn't normal between mother and son. When I was in my nightgown, he would take longer to leave, staying there talking about anything just to keep looking. When I said something about this strange behavior, he would get angry and say I had a dirty mind, that he just wanted to talk to me, that I was misinterpreting things. He said I was getting paranoid, that it was the effect of work fatigue, that I needed to rest more. He made me feel guilty for being suspicious of him, for seeing evil where he said there was none. One night he came home a bit drunk and tried to sleep in my bed. He said he was afraid, that he had had a horrible nightmare, that he couldn't sleep alone. I let him lie down, thinking it was temporary, that the next day he would go back to his room. But during the night, I felt him moving strangely, pressing his body against mine, putting his hand on my waist, on my leg. When I woke up startled and asked what he was doing, he pretended to be in a deep sleep. The next day when I brought it up at breakfast, he said I had dreamed it, that none of it had happened, that I was confusing dreams with reality. He said it was common for people who work a lot to have realistic nightmares, that I needed to take better care of myself. He made me doubt my own memory, my own perception of what had happened. I started to be afraid of my own son, but at the same time I felt guilty for thinking these things about him. After all, he was my boy, the son I had raised with so much love, with so much sacrifice. How could I suspect something so horrible? How could I imagine that my own son was having impure thoughts about me? I tried to convince myself that I was imagining things, that the heavy work was driving me crazy, that I needed to stop seeing evil where there was none. I started to avoid being alone with him at home. I always found something to do when he was around. I started locking my bedroom door, something I had never done before. I changed my bathing habits, getting dressed in the bathroom instead of the bedroom. But all of this made me even more anxious, because I couldn't understand why I was taking these precautions against my own son. But then came that day that changed my life forever, that divided my existence into before and after. It was a Monday morning, March 15th, 1998. The day had started normally, just like any other. I woke up at 5 a.m. as always, prepared breakfast, organized my lunch, got ready for work. Junior was still sleeping when I left home. It was a warm summer day, but with a nice breeze that made the morning pleasant. I arrived at the factory at the usual time, clocked in, sat at my sewing machine, and started working. I was finishing a batch of women's clothing that had to be delivered before lunch. I remember I was concentrating on the work, trying to finish that order on time, when suddenly I felt a horrible pain in my head, as if someone had hit me hard on the back of the neck with a hammer. The pain was so intense that my vision darkened immediately. I felt the floor spinning beneath my feet, a horrible sensation that everything was spinning around me. I tried to hold on to the machine table, but I couldn't. The last thing I remember is falling from the chair, hearing the noise of the other machines stopping, the women shouting, running in my direction. After that, total blackout. I was at the factory, at my usual sewing machine, finishing a batch of women's clothing that had to be delivered before lunch. Suddenly, I felt a horrible pain in my head, as if someone had hit me with a hammer. My vision darkened. I felt the floor spinning, and the last thing I remember is falling from the chair. When I woke up, I was in the hospital with a bunch of machines connected to me. The doctor explained that I had had a stroke, a cerebral hemorrhage. He said I was very young for this, that it normally happened to older people, but that the stress of work and life had contributed a lot. The left side of my body was all numb. I couldn't move my left arm or leg properly. That's when my life turned into a complete hell. I needed help for everything, to take a bath, to get dressed, to go to the bathroom, to eat. Junior, who at the time was 22 years old, offered to take care of me. He said he would give up everything, that he would dedicate his life to taking care of me because I had dedicated my entire life to taking care of him. At the time, I was moved by such dedication. The first days at home were normal. He helped me with care, took me to the bathroom, fed me, helped me take a bath. I felt grateful to have such a caring son. But then the changes began. First, he said he couldn't let anyone else take care of me because only he knew how to do it right. He sent away the woman that the social worker had arranged to help me a few hours a day. Martha was a lady in her 50s, very caring, who came 3 times a week to give me a bath and do basic physical therapy. She had experience caring for people with stroke, knew how to deal with paralysis, was gentle and respectful. But Junior started to find fault with her. He said she was careless, that she didn't do things the right way, that she was hurting me during the exercises. He made up so many complaints that the poor woman ended up quitting the job. After that, he started saying that I was very dirty, that I needed longer baths, that he had to clean me better because no one else would do it with the necessary care. The baths that used to last 10 minutes with Martha started to last more than an hour with him. He said that a paralyzed person accumulates dirt in places that normal people can't even imagine, that if not cleaned properly, it could cause a serious infection, that I could even die if I didn't have adequate hygiene. His hands started to linger longer on certain parts of my body, especially on my breasts and my private area, always with these excuses of deep cleaning. When I complained that it wasn't right, that it didn't need to take so long, he said that's how it was, that people who couldn't move properly needed to be cleaned more carefully, that I didn't understand anything about medical care. He said he had researched on the internet about hygiene for bedridden people, that specialized sites recommended meticulous cleaning, that I should be grateful that he had the patience to do that. I tried to argue, but he always had a ready answer, always a medical justification for every disgusting thing he did. I started to realize that something was very wrong when he began to touch me in a way that had nothing to do with cleaning. They were lingering touches, touches that affected me in a way that left me with disgust and terror at the same time. He would run his hand over my breasts, making circular movements, saying he was checking if there were no nodules, that paralyzed women have a higher risk of cancer because of poor circulation. He touched my intimate area with his fingers, inserted them where he shouldn't, always saying he was cleaning secretions, that he was checking if there was no infection. But I was there, dependent on him for everything, unable to even get out of bed alone. What could I do? My left side was completely dead. I couldn't even push him away with my right hand because I had no strength. It was like being trapped inside my own body, seeing and feeling everything that was happening to me, but unable to react. The feeling of helplessness was desperate. It left me in panic. But it was no use screaming because there was no one to hear. The situation kept getting worse in a gradual way that made me question whether I was going crazy or if it was really happening. He started to control everything in my life. The visits I could receive, the medicines I took, the food I ate, the programs I watched on TV. He said it was for my own good, that he knew better than anyone what I needed, that as the primary caregiver, he had responsibility for all decisions related to my health and well-being. He isolated us from the world completely. He wouldn't even let the neighbors in to see me. When someone appeared at the door, He would answer and say I was sleeping, or that I was in pain, or that the doctor had recommended absolute rest. He always made up a different excuse to keep people away. With time, everyone stopped coming, believing that I really needed isolation to recover. And the abuses kept increasing day after day, until it reached the point that you can't even imagine what this monster was capable of doing. But wait, before going straight to the end of this terrible story, I have to start at the beginning of my life, because otherwise you won't understand how a son can turn into a monster like this, how a person you raised with so much love can transform into such a cruel creature. After I left the hospital, completely dependent on him for everything, that's when the real nightmare began. What I thought was the care of a dedicated son turned into the most disgusting thing a mother can go through in life. It was as if he had been waiting years for that opportunity, as if my paralysis was exactly what he had been wanting. In the first weeks at home, when I was still adapting to the new reality of not being able to move properly, he said he needed to examine me every day to see if I wasn't developing bed sores from lying down too long. He said he had researched on the internet about care for bedridden people, and that people who stay in bed for a long time can have horrible wounds if not well cared for. He even showed me some impressive photos of infected bed sores that he had printed out. He said that could happen to me if I wasn't taken care of properly. I believed him, didn't I? He was my son, the only person I had in the world. Why would I doubt him? He seemed so concerned about me, so dedicated, spoke with such authority about the medical risks I faced. But these examinations started to last longer and longer, and his hands started to go to places that had nothing to do with caring for bed sores. He examined every inch of my body, said he had to check everything, that bed sores could appear anywhere. He started saying that my breasts looked different, that they seemed swollen, that he needed to massage them to improve blood circulation. He said he had read on specialized sites that women who stay in bed for a long time can have problems with breast circulation, and that massage was fundamental to avoid serious complications. His hands stayed there for a long time, squeezing, moving, making movements that left me with a horrible feeling in the pit of my stomach, a mixture of disgust, fear, and confusion. When I said it was hurting, or that I didn't like those touches, he replied that it was like that in the beginning it always bothers you, but that later the body gets used to it and even improves. He said I couldn't be selfish, that he was sacrificing his time to take care of me, that I had to collaborate with the treatment if I wanted to recover. He said this with a conviction that made me doubt my own feelings, made me think that maybe I was misinterpreting those touches. The first real incident, the one that marked the beginning of the more serious abuses, happened during a bath on a Thursday afternoon. He said I was very dirty down there, and that he needed to clean properly, or else I would get a terrible urinary infection that could kill me. He started touching me in a way that had nothing to do with cleaning, inserting his fingers where he shouldn't, saying he was removing accumulated dirt that I couldn't remove myself because of the paralysis. I tried to close my legs, used all the strength I had in the right side of my body to try to protect myself. But he held on tightly and spoke with that falsely affectionate voice. "Mom, relax, I'm your son. There's nothing wrong with this. You gave me baths my whole life when I was a child, cleaned my bottom, taught me about hygiene. Now it's my turn to take care of you." The comparison was absurd, disgusting, but he spoke with such naturalness that for a moment it made me question if I was exaggerating. From there, the baths turned into a real torture, sessions of horror that I knew would happen every day and that I couldn't avoid. He would spend more than an hour cleaning me, always with these disgusting excuses about hygiene and health. He said that a paralyzed woman needs special care, that I didn't understand anything about medicine, that he had researched everything on the internet and knew exactly what he was doing. And I was there, unable to move properly, depending on him for everything, with no way to resist or escape. It was a feeling of despair that I can't explain, a mixture of terror, disgust, and helplessness. Then began the touches he called medicinal, always with this excuse that it was medical treatment. He said he had to massage my belly every day for my intestines to work properly, that paralyzed people have constipation problems and that only abdominal massage solves it, that if he didn't do that, I could have intestinal obstruction and die. But his massages were strange. They started on the belly but kept going down until they reached places that had nothing to do with the intestines. When I complained, he would get angry and shout, "Mom, do you want to get better or not? Do you want to die from infection? I'm here trying to save you and you keep complaining." The psychological manipulation was the worst of all. Worse even than the physical abuse. He repeated the same phrases every day like a mantra, which broke me inside. "Mom, you depend on me for everything. If I'm not here, who will take care of you? Who will feed you, take you to the bathroom, give you medicine? Who will have patience with a cripple?" He said this while he was touching me inappropriately, as if it were the most normal thing in the world, as if I should be grateful that he was there, that he was sacrificing himself for me. He said I was a burden to anyone else, that only he had the patience to take care of a cripple like me, that if he abandoned me, I would rot in a horrible nursing home where no one would care about me. He painted such a terrible picture of my situation that I was terrified just thinking about the possibility of being without him, even knowing that what he was doing to me was wrong. It was a sick cycle of dependency and fear. When I tried to resist more, complain louder, or try to push him with the hand that still worked, he would start with subtle but very effective threats. He would speak with that calm, controlled voice. "Mom, who's going to believe a paralytic against me? Everyone here in the neighborhood, in the entire city, knows me as the dedicated son who gave up everything to take care of his sick mother. If you start making up lies about me, they'll think you've gone crazy because of the stroke, that you're having delusions." These words cut me like a knife because I knew he was right. Who would believe me against him? He started to control absolutely everything in my life, every detail of my routine. He no longer let anyone enter the house, not even the neighbors who came to visit from time to time. When Mrs. Johnson, from the house next door, appeared at the door asking how I was, he would answer and say I was sleeping because of the strong medication, that the doctor had recommended absolute rest, that visits made me agitated and hindered my recovery. The poor woman would leave worried, thinking she was helping by not bothering me. He told everyone that I was very debilitated, that the doctor had recommended absolute rest, that visits made me agitated and hindered my recovery. He isolated us from the world completely. I had no contact with anyone besides him. The threats became clearer. He said that if I told anyone anything, he would put me in a nursing home and say I had dementia because of the stroke. He said he knew people who worked in those places and that I would rot there, being mistreated by strangers, eating bad food, with no one to defend me. He painted such a terrible picture that I was terrified just thinking about it. Then came the day he decided to take care of my intimate needs, in a way I will never be able to forget. He said I had been without relaxation for too long, and that it was bad for any woman's health, especially a paralytic. He said he had researched, and that doctors recommended special exercises for women in my situation. When I understood what he wanted to do, I tried to scream, but he covered my mouth and said, "No one will hear anyway, Mom, and if they do, they'll think you're screaming in pain because of the paralysis." From that day on, my life turned into a complete hell. He established a horrible routine. In the morning, the bath with the disgusting touches. In the afternoon, the physical therapy he invented, and that included him touching me all over. At night, the special care that left me in a state of shock. All always with these excuses about health and medicine, as if he were doing me a favor. During the diaper change that I needed because of the paralysis, he would take an absurd amount of time cleaning me, always touching where he shouldn't, always with that excuse that he was keeping me clean and healthy. He said that if I got an infection because of dirt, I could die, and that he wouldn't let that happen because he loved me very much. The worst part was that he did all this talking about love. He would say, "Mom, I do this because I love you, because you are the most important woman in my life, because I can't live without you." He mixed declarations of love with disgusting acts, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. I couldn't understand how a person could talk about love while doing such a thing. He also started giving me medicines that weren't the ones the doctor had prescribed. He said he had bought special vitamins to make me stronger, but I suspected they were medicines to make me more sleepy and less resistant. After taking these vitamins, I would get more limp, more confused, without even the strength to scream properly when he abused me. The first complete sexual violation happened on a night I will never forget. He came to my room after midnight, drunk, crying, saying he was suffering a lot for not having a girlfriend, that no woman wanted to be with him because he dedicated all his time to taking care of me. He said I had an obligation to help him because it was my fault he couldn't get a girlfriend. What happened after that was so horrible that to this day I wake up screaming from nightmares. After that night, he said that now we had a special relationship, that I was more than a mother to him, that we were a couple, and that no one could know because people didn't understand true love. He said that what happened between us was a thing of God, that it was destiny, that the paralysis had happened for us to be closer. His madness knew no limits. Answer me honestly, do you think a mother has an obligation to forgive a son, no matter what he does? Because I have a very controversial opinion about this. Tell me in the comments what you think, because what you're going to hear now about the years that followed will make you understand why I think this way. What began on that cursed night became a routine of horror that lasted for years and years. Each day that dawned was one more day of torment, one more day that I prayed for God to take me soon from this suffering. Junior transformed my life into a prison where I was a prisoner of my own body, and he was the cruelest jailer you can imagine. Every day without exception, he repeated the same abuses, always with those disgusting excuses of care and hygiene. In the morning, when he woke me up for breakfast, he would already start running his hands over me, saying he was checking if I had slept well, if I hadn't developed skin wounds during the night. But his checks were pure evil disguised as medical care. During the bath, which happened every day in the late afternoon, he would spend more than 2 hours cleaning me. He said that a paralytic needs extra hygiene, that if he didn't do that, I would rot from infection. But I knew it wasn't cleaning at all. It was him satisfying his sick desires, using my body as if it were a doll. I tried to resist, but as my left arm didn't obey, my left leg was dead. I depended on him even to go to the bathroom. The physical therapy he invented was another moment of terror. He said he had studied on the internet the exercises I needed to do not to completely lose my movements. But his exercises included him touching me all over, forcing me to make movements that had nothing to do with stroke recovery. He manipulated my body as he wanted, always saying it was for my own good, that if I didn't do that, I would be paralyzed for the rest of my life. The night was when the worst happened. He said I needed special relaxation to sleep well, that a woman with a neurological problem has to have tension relief, or else she could have another stroke. And then he would do things to me that to this day give me nausea to remember. I tried to pretend I was sleeping, but he would say, "No use pretending, Mom. I know when you're awake and when you're asleep." I tried to ask for help in every way I could. When a neighbor passed in front of the house and looked through the window, I tried to make signals with my eyes, tried to move my head in a way that showed desperation. But he was always nearby, always controlling everything. If he noticed I was trying to draw attention, he would come close and say loudly, "Mom is in a little pain today, isn't she? But I already gave her the medicine. She'll get better soon." When the phone rang, he would answer it. He always told everyone that I couldn't talk because I was very debilitated, that the doctor had recommended voice rest. If they insisted too much on talking to me, he would bring the phone to me, but stay by my side listening to every word, making a nasty face if I tried to say something that could raise suspicion. I was even afraid to say help because I knew he would make me pay later. He controlled all the medicines I took. Besides the ones the doctor had prescribed for the stroke, he gave me others that he said he had bought at the pharmacy to complete the treatment. I suspected they were medicines to make me more docile, more confused, because after taking them, I would get very jumbled in my mind, unable to think straight, without even the strength to scream when he abused me. The visits were cut one by one. First, he said, I couldn't receive my friend Nancy because she talked too loud and it affected my blood pressure. Then he said the people from the church couldn't come anymore because I was very sensitive to crowds. He kept making up excuses for each person until there was no one left. We were completely isolated from the world, just him and me inside that house that became my personal hell. I tried to resist in various ways. Sometimes I pretended I was in a lot of pain to see if he would stop. But he said pain was normal in someone who had had a stroke and that what he was doing would help improve it. Other times I tried to cry, hoping he would have a little pity, but he said crying was also a symptom of a neurological problem and that I would get better with time. Once I managed to get the phone in secret and tried to call emergency services, but my speech was a bit slurred because of the medicines he gave me, and the woman on the other end couldn't understand properly what I was saying. When he arrived and saw the phone in my hand, he became furious. He said that if I did that again, he would tie me to the bed and tell everyone I was having outbursts because of the stroke. The years went by, and I lost hope that someone would one day discover what was happening. He had managed to build a perfect image of a dedicated son. The neighbors praised him, said he was an example of a son who gave up his life to take care of his sick mother. When he went out to do shopping or handle something on the street, everyone spoke well of him. How could anyone suspect a person who had such a reputation? He also became increasingly bold. He started taking me to medical appointments and would be present during all examinations. He wouldn't let the doctor examine me alone. He said I got very nervous without him nearby, that I could have another stroke if I got agitated. The doctors thought this was normal. They praised his dedication. No one imagined that he was there to control what I said during the consultations. When the doctor asked how I was, he would answer for me before I even opened my mouth. He said I was evolving well, that I was eating right, sleeping well, doing physical therapy. If the doctor insisted on speaking to me directly, he would say, "Doctor, sometimes she gets a bit confused because of the stroke, but I note down everything that happens at home and can inform you better." But one day, after almost 8 years living this hell, something happened that changed everything. The neighbor next door, Mrs. Johnson, was at home sick on bed rest, and so she spent the entire day at home at a time when she would normally be working. On that very day, I couldn't take it anymore and started screaming in desperation while he was abusing me. I screamed with a strength I didn't know I had. I screamed for help until my voice disappeared. Mrs. Johnson heard the screams through the thin wall that separated the two houses. She said later that she had never heard a scream of desperation like that it sounded like someone being tortured. She became worried and came to knock on the door to see if everything was okay. Junior answered the door all calm. He said I had had a pain crisis because of the paralysis, that he had already given me medicine, and that I was already better. But Mrs. Johnson wasn't convinced. She insisted on seeing me. She said she wanted to be sure I was okay. He tried to prevent her, but she pushed the door and entered. She found me in bed, all sweaty, with hand marks on my neck, my eyes red from crying so much. She immediately realized that something was very wrong, especially because I had a desperate look, trying to say something that she couldn't understand. Mrs. Johnson said she was going to call emergency services, that I needed to go to the hospital. He tried to convince her that it wasn't necessary, that it was just a normal crisis, that I always got like that when I had pain. But she didn't listen and called 911 anyway. While we waited for the ambulance, she stayed there by my side holding my hand, and I tried to say help with my eyes because my voice wouldn't come out. At the hospital, the doctor who treated me found something strange. He said I had signs of very high stress for a person who was supposedly being well cared for at home. He asked if I was feeling any different pain, if something was happening at home that could be making me agitated. Junior, as always, answered for me. He said it was normal for someone with a neurological problem, but the doctor insisted on examining me alone. He told Junior that he needed to do some procedures, that it was better for him to leave the room. He tried to resist, but the doctor was firm. It was the first time in 8 years that I was alone with a person who could help me. When the doctor began the examination, he noticed signs on my body that didn't match the care I supposedly received at home. The doctor asked if someone was hurting me, if I was being mistreated. I tried to speak, but I was so nervous that the words wouldn't come out right. So he asked if I could nod my head to answer yes or no. When he asked if someone in my family was hurting me, I managed to nod yes. When he asked if it was my son, I confirmed again. The doctor called the hospital social worker and a psychologist. They came to talk to me and gradually managed to understand what was happening. I told everything I could, even with my speech a bit slurred, even trembling with fear. I told them about the abuse, the touching, the threats. They were horrified, but believed me. When they went to confront Junior, he denied everything with the greatest coldness in the world. He said I was having delusions because of the stroke, that it was common for people with neurological problems to make things up. that he was a dedicated son and that those accusations were absurd. He said I was being ungrateful after everything he had done for me, that he had sacrificed his life to take care of me. He was so convincing that for a moment I thought people would believe him. He spoke with such assurance, such tranquility, that it almost made me doubt my own version. But the social worker said they would do other examinations on me, more detailed examinations, and that if they discovered any sign of abuse, they would call the police immediately. I know this story is heavy, but I bet many of you won't have the courage to hit the like button on this video. Go ahead, prove me wrong. Hit that, like. Let's see if you really have courage. Because what you're going to discover now about what happened after these examinations will shock you even more than everything I've told you so far. The examinations they did on me at the hospital confirmed everything I had said. The forensic doctor found clear signs of recent and old sexual abuse, marks on my body that proved I was telling the truth. When they showed the results to Junior, he continued to deny, but now he could no longer maintain that pose of a dedicated son. The mask had fallen, and everyone could see the monster he really was. The police were called, and he was arrested on the spot. They took him away in handcuffs from the hospital while he shouted that I was crazy, that I was making everything up because of the stroke, that he was going to sue everyone for defamation. But it was no use shouting anymore. The evidence was there on my body, marked by years of abuse, and no one could deny the reality. I stayed in the hospital for almost 2 weeks while they decided what to do with me. There was no one from the close family to take care of me, and I was terrified with the possibility of having to go to a nursing home or some place where I didn't know anyone. But then a miracle happened that I will never forget. My cousin Sarah appeared, a distant cousin of my father that I didn't even remember existed anymore. Sarah had heard about the case through a friend who worked at the hospital. She came to see me and said that even though we hadn't spoken for more than 20 years, she couldn't let a relative go through a situation like that alone. She said she had a house with a room on the ground floor, that she could take care of me, that she wouldn't leave me helpless. When I heard those words, I cried for the first time in relief, after years of crying, only in despair. Sarah's house was in a more distant neighborhood of Savannah, on a quiet street full of trees and simple houses. She had adapted the room for me with support bars in the bathroom, a lower bed so I could sit alone, a wheelchair for me to move around the house. For the first time in 8 years, I was in a place where I could be sure that no one would hurt me. The first days at Sarah's house were strange. I was so afraid that any noise made me jump with fright. When she came close to help me with something, I would automatically shrink, expecting to be attacked. My body had engraved the fear in a way that even those who wanted to help me scared me. She had the patience of an angel with me. She spoke softly, moved slowly, always warning before touching me. The first thing Sarah did was take me to a physical therapist named Melissa, who had an office nearby. Melissa was a woman in her 40s, short hair, firm but caring manner. When Sarah explained to her what had happened to me, I saw that she became outraged. She said she would do everything to help me recover my movements, that I deserved to have my independence back. The first physical therapy sessions were difficult. My body was too tense, locked by fear and trauma. Melissa explained that this was normal, that people who have suffered physical abuse usually have a very contracted body, as if it were always defending itself from an attack. She started slowly, just with breathing and relaxation exercises, teaching me to trust my own body again. But Melissa wasn't just a physical therapist. She became my confidant, my friend, my improvised therapist. During the sessions, she would let me talk about everything that had happened, listened to me without judging, helped me understand that none of it had been my fault. She said the stroke wasn't God's punishment, that I didn't deserve to have gone through that suffering, that I was a survivor, not a victim. After about 3 months of physical therapy, something happened that shocked me. During an exercise, trying to reach an object that Melissa had placed on the table, my left hand moved by itself for the first time since the stroke. It was just a small movement, the fingers closing a little, but I started crying with emotion. Melissa also cried with me and said, "See, Eleanor, your body is coming back to life." From that day on, the exercises became more intense. Melissa explained that my brain was creating new connections, that the movements would return gradually if I didn't give up. It was hard, painful work sometimes, but each small progress gave me more hope. First, some movement returned to my fingers, then to my wrist, then to my elbow. My leg also started responding better. Sarah also took me to a psychologist, Dr. Harrison, who worked with people who had suffered severe trauma. She explained that I had two traumas to process: the stroke that changed my life from 1 hour to the next, and the years of abuse that came after. She said it would be a long job, that I had to be patient with myself, that healing from trauma doesn't happen overnight. The sessions with Dr. Harrison were fundamental for me to understand many things. She explained that what Junior did to me had a name: sexual violence, abuse of a vulnerable person, false imprisonment, that it wasn't care or love or anything that resembled it, that he had used my physical dependency to satisfy his sick desires, and that this was a serious crime, no matter if he was my son or not. With time, I came to understand that I wasn't to blame for anything that happened. I wasn't to blame for having had a stroke. I wasn't to blame for having become dependent. I wasn't to blame for having raised a son who turned into a monster. Dr. Harrison taught me that victims of abuse always feel guilty, but that this guilt isn't real. It's just a way the mind finds to try to understand a situation that doesn't make sense. A few months after I started treatment, the most exciting day of my recovery happened. Melissa said she was going to try to make me walk alone, just with the support of a cane. I was terrified of falling, but she said, "Trust me, Eleanor. You're ready." And indeed I was. I managed to take about 3 steps alone, trembling but firm. Sarah was there watching and cried so much that I thought she was going to have a fit. Walking alone changed everything in my life. I no longer depended on anyone to go to the bathroom, to get a glass of water, to reach the window and look at the street. It might seem silly, but for someone who had been unable to move for years, each movement was a huge achievement. I spent hours practicing walking around the house, strengthening my legs, recovering the balance that the stroke had taken away. With physical independence returning, I started thinking about what to do with my life. I could no longer work at the textile factory. My body wouldn't stand being hunched over the machine for hours. Dr. Harrison suggested that I look for some activity that gave me pleasure. That would be a way to restart my professional life without much physical effort. It was Sarah who suggested the medicinal herbs course. She said I always had a knack for taking care of plants, that when I was young, I knew how to make teas for everything, that my mother had taught me a lot about home remedies. She said there was a lady in the neighborhood who gave a basic course on medicinal plants, that I could learn more about it, and maybe even work with it in the future. The course was a wonderful discovery. I learned about dozens of plants, their effects, how to prepare teas, homemade ointments, syrups. The teacher, Ms. Carmen, said I had a gift for dealing with plants, that my hand was good for making remedies. It was the first time in a long time that someone had praised some ability of mine that made me feel useful again. While I was recovering and rebuilding my life, the case against Junior was proceeding in court. He was sentenced to 12 years in prison for rape of a vulnerable person, false imprisonment, and mistreatment. I thought that finally justice had been done, that he would pay for everything he did to me for so many years. But what I didn't imagine is that the American prison system is a joke. Now comes the part where many people will judge me. When I found out that he had been released from prison for good behavior after only 3 years, I made a choice. Do you think I was wrong not to have reported him again when he tried to contact me? What would you have done in my place? Because what happened after that will show you that sometimes life does justice in a way that we don't even expect. 3 years after he was released, I was completely recovered and getting on with my life. I had set up a small natural products store in a commercial space near Forsyth Park, right in the center of Savannah. I sold medicinal herbs, teas, homemade ointments, syrups that I prepared myself. The business grew so much that I couldn't handle it alone. I had to hire Sylvia, a young woman who helped me with sales and loved to learn about medicinal plants. My store became known throughout the city. People came looking for remedies for everything: headaches, insomnia, stomach problems, depression, anxiety. I guided everyone on how to use the right plants, taught them how to make teas at home, gave advice on natural health based on decades of experience and study. I had become a reference on the subject. I earned my money honestly, was independent again after so much suffering. The routine of the store was a delight. I woke up early, had my coffee with Sarah, walked the 4 blocks to the center, opened the store at 8 in the morning, organized the dried herbs in the jars, prepared the ointments of the day, attended to my regular customers who already came to talk to me about life besides the remedies. It was a simple life, but full of purpose and meaning. Sarah continued living with me, but now we were more like sisters than a cousin taking care of a sick cousin. She helped me in the store on weekends, took care of the house while I worked. She was my life companion, my confidant, my closest friend. We had built a good, peaceful routine, full of true affection. For the first time in decades, I was truly happy. I had even found a boyfriend, Mr. Anthony, a 68-year-old widower who frequented my store to buy lemon balm tea for his nerves after his wife died. He knew my whole story, respected my past, treated me with a caring that I thought I would never feel again in my life. We didn't live together, but we saw each other almost every day. We went to the movies, took walks in the park, lived a nice romance of mature people who know how to value good company. Anthony was everything that Junior never was: respectful, caring, protective, without being controlling. He brought me flowers every Friday, helped me carry the heavy boxes from the store, waited for me to close so we could go to dinner together at a simple restaurant nearby. Our relationship was based on mutual respect, trust, true affection. That's how love should be. It was 20 years of complete peace, of reconstruction, of happiness that I never thought would be possible. I had managed to transform pain into purpose, helping other people through medicinal plants. I received several invitations to give talks about overcoming, about entrepreneurship in the third age, about how to start over after 50. I became an example in the city, the woman who knew how to turn things around after going through hell. My store prospered in a way I couldn't believe. I started selling at a small 3-foot counter and ended up occupying the entire room with floor-to-ceiling shelves full of jars with herbs, a refrigerator with homemade ointments, a large table where I attended to people who came looking for more detailed guidance. I had customers who came from other cities just to buy my products. During these 20 years, I also created an informal support group for women who had suffered domestic violence. Every Tuesday, after I closed the store, we would meet in the back room to talk, share experiences, give strength to each other. Many women managed to get out of abusive relationships after participating in these meetings. It was my way of giving back all the help I received when I needed it most. The fame of my store spread so much that even a newspaper reporter came to interview me. A big article came out about female entrepreneurship in the third age, with my photo in the middle of the herbs, telling how I transformed a personal tragedy into an opportunity for a new beginning. I kept the clipping of the article framed behind the counter as a reminder that it was possible to succeed in life even after going through the worst. But then, on a Thursday morning last year, I was in the store organizing some jars of arnica ointment that I had just made when I heard a familiar voice asking for help. It was a trembling, weak voice, very different from the authoritative voice that had terrorized me for so many years. When I turned to see who it was, I almost fell backwards in fright. It was Junior, but not the strong, domineering man who had violated me for a decade. There at the door of my store was a broken man, thin, with yellowish skin, walking with great difficulty, leaning on a cane. His hair was graying and thin, his eyes sunken, his clothes too loose on the body that had melted away. He seemed to have aged 20 years in the last 10. He would have been almost unrecognizable if it weren't for that voice that still gave me chills. He saw me and started crying in that pathetic way that cowardly men cry when they're in need of something. He spoke with a choked voice. "Mom, I'm very sick. I need your help. The doctor said I have multiple sclerosis, that I'll become paralyzed if I don't have special care. Please don't abandon me." He stood there at the door of my store, trembling, hoping that I would feel sorry for him as a foolish mother who forgives everything. I looked at that man who had destroyed so many years of my life and felt a strange calm. I didn't feel anger, I didn't feel fear, I didn't feel pity. I felt an icy tranquility that I had never felt before. There he was, my tormentor, in the same situation I had been in one day, dependent, vulnerable, needing care, begging for help from someone he had hurt without mercy or pity. He continued talking, trying to move me. Mom, I know I did wrong things in the past. I know I hurt you, but now I need you. I have no one else in the world. You are my only family. I'm living in a little pension room. I can't work anymore. I can barely take care of myself. Please forgive me and help me. He was using the same emotional manipulation as always, but now he had no power over me at all. Sylvia, who was organizing some herbs on a shelf, realized that something was happening and approached. I whispered to her, "You can go to lunch. I'll resolve this here." She left discreetly, leaving us alone. I didn't want witnesses for the conversation I was going to have with that man who was once my son. I listened to everything he had to say without interrupting, observing every detail of that body that was once strong and was now debilitated. He told me that the multiple sclerosis had started about 5 years ago, that at first it was just some numbness in the legs, but that it got worse until he lost part of his movements, that his hands were also compromised, that he had difficulty holding objects, balancing, walking long distances. He told me that he had been fired from his job in construction because he could no longer carry weight, that the disability pension money barely covered the room where he lived and food, that he could no longer take a bath properly by himself, that sometimes he went days without being able to have a decent meal, that he was afraid of falling and having no one to help. When he finished speaking, I took a deep breath and said with the firmest voice I could, "Now you know what it's like to be dependent on someone, don't you? You know what it's like not to be able to defend yourself, to have to trust that the person who takes care of you won't hurt you, won't take advantage of your weakness." I saw his face changing color when he understood where I was going with those words. I continued speaking with a tranquility that surprised me. "Do you remember what you did to me for 10 years while I was paralyzed? Do you remember how you abused me every day, how you threatened me, how you turned my life into a hell? Do you remember that I begged you to stop, and you said I had to be grateful because you were taking care of me?" He tried to interrupt me, but I raised my hand and didn't let him. It was my turn to speak. He had to listen after so many years of making me shut up. "For years I begged you to have a little respect, a little humanity with me. You said I depended on you, that no one else would take care of me, that I had to accept everything silently because it was a favor you were doing. Now it's you who's dependent. It's you who needs care." I saw that he was getting desperate, realizing that I wasn't going to give in to emotional blackmail as he expected. He tried to change strategy. "Mom, I was young. I was immature. I didn't know what I was doing. Now I understand that I was wrong, that I hurt you. I regret everything. I swear to God I regret it." But I had heard that talk before, at the time of the trial. You regret it because you need me now, not because you understood the harm you did to me. If you were in good health, with money, independent, you would never have appeared here asking for forgiveness. Your regret is self-interest, not true remorse. I said this looking straight into his eyes, without turning away my gaze for even a second. He tried the last card, the most disgusting of all. "Mom, I know you're a good person, a person of faith, a person who forgives. You've always been like that. You've always had a big heart. You won't let your own son die of abandonment, will you? What will people think if they know you denied me help?" Then I laughed in a way that even I was startled by. "My son died a long time ago. What's in front of me is just a stranger who once did me a lot of harm indeed. And you know what people think of me today? They think I'm a brave woman who knew how to overcome a horrible trauma, who built a new life after 50. That's what matters. Now you're going to leave my store and never come back. You're going to look for some public nursing home, some charity institution, someone who is paid by the government to take care of you. Because free care, care of love, care of family, you lost the right to that when you decided to transform me into a sexual object for an entire decade." He left the store staggering, crying loudly, but I didn't feel even a bit of pity. After he left, I locked the door of the store, turned the little sign to closed, and sat in the chair behind the counter. I cried a lot, but it wasn't a cry of sadness. It was a cry of total liberation. It was as if a huge weight had been lifted from my shoulders all at once. Finally, I had managed to look my aggressor in the eye and say no. I had managed to have the power that he had taken from me during so many years of terror. I found out later through acquaintances who worked in social services that he ended up interned in a public nursing home, one of those that the government maintains for people who have no family or money. I know that his life there is not easy, that he depends on the goodwill of overworked staff for everything, that sometimes he spends hours waiting to be attended to, that he eats bad food, that he sleeps in a collective room with other sick people. It's exactly the treatment he deserved. Today, at 72 years old, I can say with all certainty that I am a complete and fulfilled woman. I have my store that works very well and gives me financial independence. I have Sarah, who is my heart's family. I have Anthony, who loves and respects me the way every woman deserves to be loved. I have health, disposition, and many plans still to accomplish. I created an informal support group for women with disabilities that has already helped dozens of people report abuse, get out of toxic relationships, and rebuild their lives with dignity. Every week I receive messages from women who manage to free themselves from horrible situations after participating in our meetings. It's my way of transforming pain into purpose, trauma into life mission. My story proves that no matter how old you are, no matter how many traumas you've suffered, no matter how many times you've fallen, it's always possible to start over. The important thing is to never give up, to seek help when you need it, to believe that you deserve good things in life, that you deserve respect, caring, dignity, and most importantly, never let those who hurt you continue to have power over you. I am Eleanor Bennett. I'm 72 years old. I live here in Savannah, and this is the story of my life, of how the worst trauma transformed me into the strongest woman I know. If you want more stories of overcoming like mine, subscribe to the Grandparents' Tales channel. Here we prove that there's no age to start over and that the sweetest revenge is to live well. So, did you like my story? Today, I feel victorious because I strived as best I could to overcome all difficulties. If you can, click on the squares that are passing on the screen to see more videos and hear more stories of warrior women like me. You'll be surprised at the strength that we American women have to overcome anything that life puts in our way. Life teaches that whoever sows wind reaps storm, and whoever sows evil one day pays the price.